So about 1,000 people got laid off in media this week. Let's talk about that. Why is that happening? Now, the first job I ever had was I worked at McDonald's. And I worked at McDonald's for $7 an hour. And it was drilled in my head that I needed to be working that entire time for the $7 an hour I was paid, 8 hours a day, to make the company money. And if I was standing around or not doing anything, I was not making McDonald's money. And that I then wasn't worth the paycheck. And that, you better, be wiping the tables or serving the customers or doing something. Don't stand around doing anything. And it was kind of drilled in my head that I needed to prove my worth a lot of times. That unless, I was making money, bringing value to the company in a very tangible way, my bosses at McDonald's felt like I could easily be replaced. So from a very early age, it was drilled into my head the need to show tangible value. That you, as an individual, offer tangible value to whoever is employing you. And I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that in journalism, especially if you're a journalist or working in media, because sometimes you're a little bit removed from the business decisions that go on day to day. But we've seen a kind of shift in the digital media space lately, and that companies that were started 5, 10, years ago, they were all started on venture-backed capital with the idea that if we grow to a large enough size, we will be able to monetize content and the things we make and become profitable at scale. And so they would raise a bunch of money from investors, and investors would be willing to float this company along for a certain amount of time, with the understanding that if they scale and grow big enough, they can be a very profitable company. The greatest example for this, if you want an analogy, is Amazon, right? Amazon never really made any money for a long time. It was backed by investments, and they just grew at scale until they became so big that they could start turning a profit and start crushing their competitors. So this was kind of the approach taken to digital media with companies like the big ones that you hear about, like Huffington Post and BuzzFeed and Vice. And things are starting to pan out not in the best light. BuzzFeed, for instance, is still a venture, backed company, and it hasn't been able to turn a profit. And I think the companies and individuals that have invested millions of dollars in media companies are now starting to get tired and want to start to see a profit. And so you're starting to see companies having to make really callous decisions in order to make their companies profitable. And it's not just Huffington Post and BuzzFeed and Gannet. For instance, Vice has basically had a hiring freeze for the last year. Any jobs really coming into Vice, unless you're, have something to do with ad sales or marketing direction, you're going to be working on a permalance contract, which is kind of a permanent freelance contract. They're not really hiring employees. And BuzzFeed is having to lay off hundreds of people, as is Huffington Post. BuzzFeed eliminated entire desks. They eliminated curation desks, national news desks, health desks, LGBT desks. Anything that wasn't, I think, immediately tangible in the value it was bringing. And when I mean value, in times like this, I mean monetary value. Money it was making. So for people wondering out there, why is this happening? There's kind of a downsizing going on. A need, the bubble is bursting. That all the investments that have gone into these media companies, those investors are now really wanting to start to see a profit. And in order to see a profit, they need to lean down the companies now. They've grown to a certain size. Okay, we're at scale. We now need to cut back until we're profitable. We don't want to raise any more money. You see this with Vice. You're now seeing this with BuzzFeed. You're seeing this with Huffington Post. And you're seeing this with Gannet, as Gannet, for instance, is being bought by Digital First, which is owned by a hedge fund company. A hedge fund company wants to buy Gannet. Gannet's a public company. Nonetheless, they're offering to buy Gannet, but in order to buy Gannet, They want to make sure it's profitable, and in order to make sure it's profitable, they're gonna slash and burn down their workforce to make it leaner and meaner. And in these times of transition, as the market expands and contracts in any industry, whether it be banking or media or mining or fast food service, if you're unlucky enough in that time to find yourself viewed as not, bringing monetary value, or at least immediate monetary value to the company, sometimes the reaper can come for you. It's really easy when you're starting out, if you want to start out as a journalist or work in media, to have high ideals about telling stories and giving a voice to people. But the reality is, a lot of times these are businesses, and businesses care about the bottom line. Whether they're a private company or a public company, at the end of the day, they care about the bottom line. They're there to make money, and the company's got to make money in order to keep people employed and to hire people in the future. So, and if you're thinking, well, the answer is, the problem is, these media employees aren't unionized. That's not the problem. I mean, Huffington Post just laid off 40 people of its union. They have no problem getting rid of unionized people. If they need to seek profitability, they will do so. The union is not going to save you. So I think if you're wondering what is the media landscape going to look like in a year or two, I think it's going to be a much tighter market, a more competitive market. There was a real bet that as Facebook grew in size, publishers would grow in size as well. And when I say publishers, I mean media publishers like Vice, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post. And as they grew along with Facebook, they would also be able to make more ad dollars. And it turned out that ultimately, because Facebook controlled the distribution pipeline, all these publishers were posting things on Facebook. People would choose to advertise on Facebook versus the media publishers, and Facebook would end up cleaning up most of the ad dollars coming in. And since Facebook now controls most of that, and those profits haven't been realized on the media publishing side, you're seeing those companies really constrict down. So, I think the biggest takeaway from this is, as much as you can be an idealist sometimes, there's always the ROI. There's always the bottom line. And the closer you can make yourself to that money source, usually the more indispensable you can make yourself. But nonetheless, a wise person once said to me, ultimately, unless you're working for yourself, you're just standing around waiting to get fired. And that things can happen above. You can even be making the company money, bringing value to the company, and monetarily or in other ways. But decisions above you, whether they be rational or irrational, can eliminate you like this. And that's just the way of the world. The media is not exempt from the private market. So yeah, that's what's going on. I think people in the industry have kind of seen this coming down the pipeline. But don't let it discourage you from continuing to pursue a job in media. But just remember that these are businesses, and think about the value you bring to a company always. Don't let that escape out of your mind. Anyway, just a thought to explain a little bit about what's happening in media in New York City at the moment. Have a good morning, guys.